So let's make a start. So welcome everyone. For those who are new to OET, my name is Bethan Edwards and I am the Academic Director here at Specialist Language Courses. And today in our live lesson, we're going to talk about Listening C, and we're going to go through some tips and strategies. So before starting, just a few tips on how our session is going to run. First of all, I'd like to let you know that this session is being recorded, so feel free to take notes and to take screenshots, but please know that we will be recording this and we will be putting it onto our YouTube channel. So don't forget to subscribe. You can find lots of free OET tips, videos and strategies. Second, a little bit on how we are going to be using Zoom today. So we're going to be using the chat box for classroom tasks and sharing your answers. We may use some polls. In order to answer a poll question, click on the answer that you want to choose and click submit, and then we talk through the options. And we also have the Q&A icon. We'll use this for questions at the end of our session. So if you have any questions at the end, please type them here and I will do my best to answer them. Third, please don't forget to register for our next free live lesson, which will be on Thursday, and we'll be focusing on OET speaking, looking at common verbs and useful phrases. You can find the registration link in the chat box now. Okay, let's get started. So we're going to talk about Listening C today, and we're particularly going to look at an overview of the listening exam. So for those of you who might be new to OET, what can you expect in the listening exam? Then we'll focus specifically on the format of Listening C, what to expect from the audios, and then we'll look at approach and strategies that you can use to help you prepare and answer questions. And we will also do some practice today as well. So what happens in the OET listening test? The test altogether is 40 minutes, about 40 minutes long. There are 3 parts with a total of 42 points, 42 questions, and all questions carry the same mark. The listening test format, you have listening A, where you hear 2 patient-led dialogues and you have a gap fill task. Listening B, you have 6 dialogues or monologues and 3 option multiple choice questions. And listening C, which we're going to talk about in more depth today, you have 2 longer presentations or interviews and 3 option multiple choice. And as we said, it is about 40 minutes, so 15 minutes for listening A, about 10 minutes for B, and then about 15 minutes for listening C. So what can you expect from listening part C? As we've said, it's 15 minutes long. You will hear 2 audios. The audios will be a presentation and an interview. So it's usually a presentation and an interview, or it could be 2 presentations. In the interview, you will hear 1 person asking questions and usually 1 person answering questions. Then in the presentation, it's usually 1 person speaking about a topic. In terms of the topic, it should be accessible to a wide range of healthcare professionals. And the thing that is different in OET Listening C, as opposed to some of the other exams, is you'll be listening for views and opinions rather than factual information. So you won't be picking out numbers, names, and statistics, but you'll be listening for views and opinions. And you will only hear the recording once. So for the questions, they are multiple choice questions. You have 3 options to choose from, A, B, and C. Each option will have a similar format or focus. And you have 6 questions for each audio. So you have 12 questions for listening C altogether. Listening C, each time you do Listening C practice and on exam day, you will hear these instructions. So it's always a good idea to be familiar with what to expect on exam day, as this will then help you to reduce any exam day nerves, as you are very familiar with what's coming up and you know what to expect, and there shouldn't be any surprises in terms of the format and the instructions. After that, you will be given the topic of the extract, so it will be introduced on your question paper, and you will also hear it on the audio. So you will hear the topic and the context, and then you will be given 90 seconds to read the questions before the audio begins. So it's very important that you have a clear idea of what you should do in those 90 seconds. So having a clear strategy and steps to follow, again, will help you to reduce your exam day nerves and give you the best chance of getting a good score in your OET. So this is an example of a question. So use the questions to guide yourself through the presentation or the interview. So when you, in your 90 seconds, you should look through all of the questions to get an overall idea of the structure of the interview. You will then see 3 possible answers. And in order to mark the answer on the paper-based test, you need to color in the answer that you choose with a pencil. And in the computer-based test, you need to make sure that you clearly choose that answer. Now, in the paper-based test, if you change your mind, you need to make sure that the answer that you want is very clear. So as you're listening, if you decide to discount some answers, it's a good idea perhaps to put marks on the right-hand side of the question rather than on the left, so there's no confusion over what your answer is. The topics could be related to any of the 12 professions from within OET, but the content should be understandable to all professions. Something else that is important to know about Listening C is you will need to understand large parts of the audios, not just keywords, but longer parts of the audio in order to answer the question. So thinking about the topic in particular and perhaps the source, so where do these audios come from? I have a question for you today. So what type of audios can you hear in part C? So in part A, we've seen that you often hear a conversation between a healthcare professional and a patient. What are the possible topics or perhaps sources for the audios in Listening C? Write your ideas in the chat now. Okay, great, thank you. So we have a suggestion, perhaps a lecture. So possibly a lecture, perhaps a presentation to perhaps a group of students. We have research, okay. So possible presenting some research ideas. We've got academic research, okay, good. So the academic research, yes, so perhaps it could be somebody giving views on a piece of academic research. Okay, great. So let's have a look at what you can expect. So for example, you may hear a monologue. So if it's a presentation, it could be one person speaking. It could be a workplace presentation. And again, this could be presenting research, but it will be related to workplace. It could be a training event. So somebody giving training for a group of professionals, or perhaps a visiting speaker. So maybe similar to a lecture. If it's an interview, it may be an interview discussing a healthcare topic. For example, somebody giving an opinion on a new treatment for a medical condition. The interview the answers will be focused on the person being interviewed. So the person answering the questions, they will be the ones who usually say the information that answers your questions on the OET paper. And the person asking the question, so the interviewer, use the questions to guide you through the paper and to help you to keep your place. So how should you approach listening C? Before you listen, you have 90 seconds. In these 90 seconds, you should look at the context of the talk. You should notice the structure. So this is where you look through the questions on that audio and you notice if there is a change in topic perhaps, or if the speaker moves on from one section of the presentation to another section, or one section of the interview to another section of the interview. You should make sure that you understand the questions. So we're going to practice doing this together today. And you should make sure you read the options and notice the differences between them. So we are going to follow these steps together, and we're going to do one practice together, and then we have one practice for you today. So we look at the context and we activate our knowledge. So we look here, we can see that it's an interview, so we can expect questions and answers. We can see it's a cardiologist, so his speciality relating to cardiology. So we start thinking about what do I already know about cardiology? And then we specifically see that he is an expert on Chagas disease. So then we activate our knowledge. Do I know anything about Chagas disease? Do I know about the symptoms, the treatment, where it occurs? So we start to activate our knowledge. We then read through the questions and notice the structure of the interview or the presentation, and then we underline some keywords. So notice we underline keywords in both the question and the options. These keywords are the words that will help us to listen for the answer. Now remember that in listening C, we may not hear these exact words, but we may hear words with a similar meaning. So let's do this question together. So for 31, one of our keywords here is why. So we're listening for a reason. Why does he regard it as a neglected disease? So we're listening for reasons here. If we look at A, we're looking for the social group. So we're listening for information about which groups of people could be affected. So perhaps from a particular area or a particular social background. For B, we're looking from a perspective of patients, that they don't realize that they're infected. Perhaps they haven't noticed. And C, we're looking at the impact of Chagas disease, that it's severe in a small number of cases. So again, we go back to our question and we work out, is this the reason it is a neglected disease? Okay. So we have looked at our question. We have underlined our keywords. We have noticed the differences. So now what we're going to do is we're going to listen. So I'd like you to listen, and I'd like you to make a note, this time just in your notebook. What do you think is the answer to the question? Why does Dr. Robson think Chagas is neglected? So why does he think that people don't pay attention to it, or perhaps people don't know about it so much? Okay, so let's listen to the audio and make a note in your notebook.
Today we're talking to Dr. Jack Robson, a cardiologist and Chagas disease specialist in the USA. Dr. Robson, what is Chagas disease and why is it referred to as a neglected disease?
Chagas is caused by a parasite called Trypanosoma cruzi. Most sufferers become infected when they're bitten by an insect, commonly known as the kissing bug, which carries the parasite.
Right.
People often don't realize they've been bitten, and during the initial phase of the infection, symptoms are normally mild or absent.
Okay.
70% of those infected never develop complications. For the other 30%, the disease tends to remain silent for a long time, often 30 years, but it eventually enters a chronic phase characterized by serious cardiac, digestive system, and neurological disorders. About 7 million people worldwide are thought to have Chagas, but it attracts relatively little publicity or funding for research. This indifference is largely down to it being primarily a disease of marginalized communities in Latin America, where it's endemic. You need resources to force significant action.
Right, I see.
Okay, so let's take a look at what our correct answer is. So in this question, our correct answer is in fact A. So let's have a look at why. So remember, we want to know why he thinks it's a neglected disease. So we come to the audio and we see it attracts relatively little publicity or funding. And then we look again, you need resources to force significant action. So this is telling us that he thinks it's neglected, that it doesn't have enough funding, it doesn't have enough research or publicity. And then this is where we can find out why. So he says it's largely down to. If it's largely down to, this is giving a reason. So he says it's largely down to, it's largely because it affects marginalized communities, so specific social groups. So because it affects these groups, in his opinion, it does not have much attention. When you are preparing for your listening C, it's always a good idea to look at why the other answers are wrong. As we'll see, quite often answers are mentioned, but we need to be very careful that it's answering the question. So let's have a look. B is not correct because it is, as a few of you notice, it's mentioned in the audio, but it's not the reason it is a neglected disease. He's giving us information about the background of the disease. And C is mentioned, but again, it's not given as a reason that it's neglected. He's giving us information about the disease, and he describes a severe impact, but again, it's not the reason. So we have to be very careful when we're choosing our answers that it answers the right question. Okay. So now it's your turn. So today we are going to use the topic of male breast cancer as our practice question, which is relevant this week, as this week is in fact Male Breast Cancer Awareness Week. So let's have a look at our question. So we need to remember that you need to underline keywords in the question, and you also need to notice the differences in the answers. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to read through the question and the options. Okay, so in question 31, in our questions, we've got key questions, keywords. Why does Paula think that male breast cancer is poorly researched? So we're looking for reasons. So we can see that Paula thinks it is poorly researched. There isn't enough research, or perhaps the quality of the research isn't good enough, and we want to know why. So we're listening for reasons. Then we notice the differences. Here we have information about the diagnosis. Is the reason that it's poorly researched because it is not diagnosed early enough? Therefore, there's a lack of research. Is the reason that it is poorly researched because it's not viewed as requiring separate study? So here we can assume that perhaps she's going to compare male breast cancer to female breast cancer, and it suggests that perhaps it doesn't need a different study, just the same study as for women. Or is it C? Does she think it's poorly researched because of the group that it affects? So it according to this, it doesn't occur very often, and it only occurs in older men. And is this the reason why it's poorly researched? So let's listen and find out. So I'm going to play you the audio one time. And this time, I would like you to write your answer in the chat. So please write 31. So we know it's question 31. And what is your answer, A, B, or C?
Today we're talking to Paula Weston from Breast Cancer Network about male breast cancer. Paula, why is male breast cancer referred to as a neglected disease?
Breast cancer in men is much less common than in women and remains an understudied illness. If we compare the statistics, it is easy to understand why there are fewer cases of male breast cancer to research. For example, the estimated risk of a man being diagnosed with breast cancer before the age of 85 is around 1 in 715, while the risk of a woman being diagnosed with breast cancer before the age of 85 is around 1 in 8. Each year, tens of thousands of new breast cancer cases are diagnosed, of which about 140 cases are of male breast cancer. Much of the information we have about male breast cancer comes from our understanding of female breast cancer, although it is clear that men react differently from women to a diagnosis of breast cancer.
Okay, great. So decide on your answer, A, B, or C, and put it into the chat box. Now remember, you can also discount answers if you're sure that one of the answers is not correct. You can discount it and look at the other two. Okay, so we've got quite a lot of you choosing between B and C. So quite rightly, not many people have put A here. So let's have a look at our correct answer and look at why. So our correct answer is B. It is not viewed as requiring separate study. So let's have a look at why. So notice we're looking at the section in red here. One thing to notice immediately is that it's not just one sentence. We're looking at the first part and the last part. That is important here. So we check here. It is an understudied illness, so we know that we need to listen quite carefully. An understudied illness is a synonym, another way to say poorly researched. And we can see that there are not so many cases to study as women. And then we listen to the end, and she states that the information we have about male breast cancer comes from our understanding of female breast cancer. So she's inferring that the reason that there is it's poorly researched is because some people believe it doesn't require separate study. So we need to infer our answer here. So let's look at why the other answers are not correct. We do have information about diagnosis, but we don't have information that it is not diagnosed early enough, which then causes this lack of or poor amount of research. And then C, we do have some statistics about when it is diagnosed, but it's not specifically given as a reason as to why breast cancer is poorly researched, the fact that it is rarely seen and the fact that it only affects older men. So that is not our correct answer. So a review of your strategies for listening C. Make sure you look at the context and read the question carefully. Read the options and notice the differences between them while underlining keywords. Then listen for the correct option and also notice why the other options are not correct. Now, be careful that the words in the questions and the answer options are likely to be different to those answers in the audio, and quite often they are implied and not directly stated as we've seen. So what are some of the common difficulties for students? We find that it is difficult when the topic is unfamiliar, when it's quite a long audio to listen to. The distractors, so where options for A, B, and C look similar. Difficult to identify attitude and opinion within the audio, and also keeping your place. So some ideas on what you can do to help you with these difficulties. If it's an interview, make sure you use the interviewer's questions to guide you. Remember that the person being interviewed who's answering questions provides the answers. Presentations, you do need to work a bit harder to keep your place. So notice signposting phrases, pauses, and when the speaker moves on and when you know to move on to the next question. So how can you prepare for listening part C? Some study tips. Make sure in your self-study that you listen extensively to presentations and podcasts, so as much and often as possible. Some resources that we recommend would be TEDMed or BBC Inside Health. Practice listening to longer talks to help train your brain, so to build up your stamina, to stay focused. Listen to a variety of audios and a variety of different accents on healthcare topics. Listen out for the speaker's attitude and opinion, and perhaps make notes on how speakers express their opinion, and practice dealing with unfamiliar content and vocabulary. So don't always choose a topic that you already know a lot about. So for listening C, remember you need to stay focused, read the questions before you listen, use the cues provided in the question, and make sure you check your answers on the paper-based version. Make sure that it's very clear which answer you've chosen. Okay, so it is time for questions. So if anybody has any questions, please pop them into the question and answer box. And I will do my best to answer them. So let's have a look. Okay, so we have a question. We have a question on listening A, which is about how to expand your vocabulary for listening part A, which is a slightly different topic. So please have a look at our listening A video. But also I would say that it's a good idea to make sure that you're familiar with different healthcare professions and vocabulary around that to help you with listening A. For example, you may listen to an eye specialist talking to a patient. Therefore, it would be a good idea for you to make sure that you're familiar with different eye conditions and treatments to then help you with listening A. Okay, so if you have questions relating to listening C, pop them in the question and answer. Okay, so we have question, where can you see listening videos? We have done some live lessons on listening already, so please go to our YouTube channel and you'll be able to find those there. Okay, we have a question. Okay, about listening. So there's a question about listening. Will you use headphones in the exam? Now, this is a good question. It depends on what format of the exam you're taking, and also where you're, which country you're taking in which exam centre. So if you are taking the exam in the UK, the paper-based version of the exam in the UK, then it is unusual for the test centre to provide headphones. Instead, it will be audio played to everyone. If you are taking the computer-based test or a computer-based test at a centre, then you should be provided headphones, yes. Outside of the UK, you may be provided headphones. It depends on the test centre. Okay. Thank you for coming, everyone. It has been great to have you here today. Don't forget to register for our next free live lesson on Thursday, in which we'll be doing OET speaking. You can find the link in the chat to register now. If you loved our live lesson today, then please stay tuned to our social media to find out more, as we will be doing these live sessions weekly, and you can find out what's coming up on our social media channels. And if you are preparing for your OET, we have some great courses and resources. We have Reach OETB for nursing and medicine. This is an online course where you get lots of practice on how to prepare for your OET, and also it will help you to expand your vocabulary. So if you're looking to expand your vocabulary for listening A, then our Reach OETB course has exam practice and vocabulary and language development as well. We have an OET practice. We have OET practice tests available. So if you're coming up to your if you're coming up to your test, then a practice test can be a really great option to help practice your timing. And we also have a writing correction service. So if you want specific feedback on your writing, then we send you a set of case notes and give you specific feedback on an OET letter. All the links are available for you in the chat box. And if you have any more questions, please just don't hesitate to contact us on inquiries@specialistlanguagecourses.com, or you could go to our webpage, specialistlanguagecourses.com, and use the chat function there to ask any questions. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you very much for coming along today, and have a lovely day. Bye-bye.